Gecko or Lucci is the question. It's a question I've been asking myself a lot recently as well, after seeing a lot of people not only have success with Gecko at a tournament level, at a regional / treasure cup level, but also seeing two Geckos now in set 7 win national major tournaments throughout countries. So what I wanted to go over today is the pros and cons of both Gecko and Lucci, and then I wanted to say, in my opinion, which one I think is better at a tournament level. Not individually, but at a tournament level. So before I do that, let me tell you guys I will be streaming on Whatnot. They're actually sponsoring this video. Double box opening of OP07. So if you guys want to, join that and get some packs for yourself, check out the code in my link below and get a free $10 for you to just literally get $10 essentially. Yeah, just use that code, you get a free $10 and you can buy basically like 1 or 2 packs with that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. Okay, so of course we have Baxter joined to my left. He's sleeping, even though he's been sleeping pretty much the entire freaking day. And yeah, we have Gecko versus Lucci. So from the get-go, we'll say that the starter cards that Rob Lucci has access to is Spandam. The starter card that Gecko has access to is Sindri. Now you can play brand new as well. I've seen people kind of going away from that list and just playing Sindri, so we'll just say Sindri versus Spandam. Spandam whiffs most of the time for me anyway, so it feels like it's the same as Sindri, but Spandam has a potential to get you a 2K or a Tempest Kick or a Stussy, so Spandam technically is the better 1-cost character to start out with, so we are in Lucci's favor so far. But now we go to the early to middle parts of the game, in which we have Perona and Absalom for Gecko Moria, and we have Kaku and Lucci for Rob Lucci. Now, I believe that Gecko has a better early game than Lucci, because Gecko doesn't need to put stuff in the from the trash to the bottom of the deck in the early game to actually function its deck. So for example, we play Perona, we trash 2 cards from our deck, and obviously 1 card from our hand, and then we play Perona, make your opponent discard a card, and then establish a 5k body on the board, which is really good. Now, what Lucci does is they either play Khalifa, which is a 2k counter from their hand, which they only play probably 9 of in total, so they're getting rid of a 2k to cycle their hand, and they're only applying a 4k body, which in my opinion isn't nearly as good. So I think that Gecko has a better early game with Perona, because you just have it and you're able to control the hand a lot better, and you're able to establish a body on the board that not only is not rested, meaning it's active when it comes out, but it is very much a threat the next turn, because not only did it just take another card out of your hand, but if it survives, it's going to take another card out of your hand, and you took a 6k attack from the Gecko Moria, which either got a card out of your hand again, like he's just taking a bunch of cards out of your hand, so he's able to control the game a lot better. Whereas Lucci is more of a reactionary deck, whereas like once your opponent basically has to have something on the board for Lucci to actually be good, because if your opponent's not really playing a whole lot, you're not really, like, you're just establishing like 5-6k characters, like 5-cost 6k characters, and I don't really think that's that good personally. I really don't. So then we'll go to the top end, right? So the top end is Gecko, Isho, and Sabo. Now technically all of these decks have access to, or I'm sorry, both these decks have access to all of these cards, but Gecko is a lot better at getting these efficiently, because he can play Hogback efficiently. And I know people have been playing Hogback, or some people have been playing Hogback and Lucci, but it's only a 1 of. So if you mill it, you can't really do anything with it unless you get it off of Gecko. So you either find the Hogback or you find the Gecko. Either way, you have to draw one of them. And if you're milling your entire deck, it's kind of hard for you to do that, because Gecko can get back Hogback and Hogback can get back another Gecko, or you can, play Hogback, get back a Gecko, one of the two. But you have to see it at a certain time. If you don't see Hogback at a certain time with Lucci, it feels like you just don't have the ability to play it for the rest of the game. Whereas Gecko, you actually have the ability to play it in multiple parts of the game, because Gecko always has a play, whereas Lucci doesn't always have a play that's optimal. The worst case scenario, you can just play 2 4 costs from your, 1 4 cost from your hand, 1 4 cost from your trash with Gecko Moria, and attack for like 7-7 or something like that, and then, or 7-8, whatever the math is, and then you'll be good. Whereas like Lucci, you're like using Tempest Kick, you're using, all these cards to reduce, and then you're killing something. Whereas like it's too reactive. It's too reactive, and it relies on you saving a lot of your cards to kill things, or just playing a suboptimal board and then trying to KO whatever your opponent does, which in certain strategies is fine, but a lot of times it just like doesn't really work as well as just building a board and forcing your opponent to deal with it, and then being able to recover and recruit. I don't know if that's the word I'm looking for. That board with Gecko, which is what Gecko is like kind of known for. The next thing is like who uses Brook better. I would definitely say Lucci uses Brook better. I don't even know if people are playing Brook in the new Gecko Moria for OP07. Even though I think Brook is really good. You know, you get Hina, you know, hard play Hina, you play Rebecca, and then obviously Rebecca can get back Brook, and then you can establish, you know, Brook, a blocker, and then Hina, which is obviously really powerful. And I just think that's just a really good turn. I think that's a really good turn. And funny enough, on your 10 Dawn turn, you can use your leader effect, get something, you know, let's say an Absalom, right? You can also play Rebecca, so that's 7 Dawn, and then you can hard play Hina, so that's 10 Dawn. So that's pretty good if you have access to it. But I will say, because if you get Enia's lobby out on the board, then I do think Lucci is better with this Brook right here, and it has a good early game if that's the case. The problem is people are only playing like anywhere from, you know, they play like 3 stage isn't searchable, so sometimes you just don't see it, and obviously Brook isn't searchable either, so sometimes you see it a little bit late, and it's just a little bit of a problem. And if you get it back off Rebecca, you play it rested, and then they can easily just attack into it. So Brook is a little bit vulnerable in that situation. But I will say, because you have automatic, if you have the stage, you have automatic removal, then it's a lot better for Lucci. But I do think there is a certain position in the game where Brook could actually be better in Gecko because of, you know, all the other things involved with Gecko. Because if you don't see stage, like Lucci's bad, basically. Like with Brook, at least, the 3-cost Brook. Then the last thing I will say, and I'll bring up some other points in a second as well, but the last thing on this like little, you know, whiteboard is the defensibility. The defensibility of the deck. So Gecko plays about 12 2Ks, whereas Lucci plays 9, but Gecko has recurable 2Ks. 8 of them you're able to get back off of the, what is it called? Hogback. You're able to get back Sindri and Perona, and they also play cards like Borsellino, because they just can. They have the space for it. And then they also just play Rebecca and Sabo, same thing. Lucci plays Rebecca and Sabo as well, but they don't play the Borsellino. And the Borsellino is really good in the mirror match because it forces you to have a 6-cost Brook. But just the amount of 2Ks that you have, the recurable 2Ks that you have, on top of having access to, you know, just so much better top, like not better top end, but more consistent top end, where, you know, you can search for your top end. I think overall, I had some notes here. Let me make sure we hit all of our notes real quick. So the pros with Gecko is consistent access to top end cards. You always have a play with Gecko. Like I said, you have the ability to, you know, always just use your trash to play something. If you have a dead card in hand, like an Isho or a Sabo, or, you know, some people are playing the 6-cost Sakazuki, all you do is pitch it, and you can play anything from your trash, basically, and it's just really powerful. You can control the hand size really well because you obviously play cards like Isho, and you play cards like Perona, so you're able to control your hand pretty well. The deck has plenty of counter. The cons is it has limited hand size because it no longer has access to cards like Kuzan and Brand New, because they're just not playing the Navy engine anymore. So you don't really have a whole lot of, you know, value you can get off of Gecko other than Gecko, get Hogback, get another Gecko. That's pretty much about it. But in terms of hand advantage, it's kind of gone. You know, because you just don't really have any cards that plus you cards or are even 1-for-1s. You're pretty much just always going -1 from hand, basically, anytime you do anything, especially if you're going to remove something from the field. So that's the cons of Gecko. The limited removal as well. You're no longer playing character Lucci. So character Lucci obviously can kill 2 things, which is good into red purple law. But the fact that you can only kill 1 thing now with Absalom, it's a little bit more difficult to control red purple law's board. So I feel like Gecko is worse into red purple law than Lucci. But there are certain situations where it could be really good if you are playing Brook, because then you can rely on playing like Brook plus Hina, or Hina plus Absalom, or, you know, whatever the combo is. Perona -3 cost, then hard play Brook, you know, if they have 5 cards in hand. Same thing right there. And then you can use the, you know, the extra character you established to kind of beat them down and just kind of go from there. But Yeah, limited removal with with Gecko right here. Now the pros with Lucci is it has the highest ceiling in the game for currently for removal. Because it has access to Tempest Kick, Sky Slicer, because it has access to Ineos Lobby, because it can, you know, play this Sabo and then Isho, and obviously has access to Gecko, it can remove any threat in the game pretty easily and establish big characters in the process that are really hard to deal with, whether it be by battle or by card, because they're 8 costs. So it's really tough to get them off the board. And not only are they establishing one of them, sometimes even 2 of them with like a Lucci if they play Gecko, but they're removing like a 10 cost basically for free and drawing a card off it, which is just really powerful. Really, really, really powerful. It can pretty much kind of going off my last point, it can pretty much high roll any deck in the game, and it's just, yeah, it can just steamroll you. Also, the whole deck is centered around removal, whereas Gecko isn't necessarily centered around removal. It's more of like an all-around black deck and like a recursion deck / like hand control deck. Whereas Lucci, it's all about KO, right? KO. You got Lucci, Kaku, they both KO. Finger Pistol KOs. You have Sabo, it KOs. Gecko doesn't KO, but it basically KOs. Then you have this Brook, it KOs, right? Whereas like, you know, in Gecko, you have Perona, you have Isho, because they play like 2 or 3 of those. You have, you know, these blockers right here, and it's just more revolved around winning a more grindy game, whereas this deck revolves around like winning a more just I'm going to control your whole field kind of game. So it has just way more removal, and it's just centered around removal, which is obviously important. But the cons, it has a lot of cons. It's inconsistent with its top end. There are plenty of games with Lucci you can play where you just don't see Gecko or Isho or Sabo, or if you see them, it's just late and it's kind of over with anyway. Like you can't realistically play them and get at maximum value from them. Has a ton of bricks, which means it can't survive lethal very often, meaning it can basically just die when they're at 2 life. Like if Lucci's at 2 life against a deck that can be a little bit aggressive or already has like somewhat of a board established because they drew their top end a little bit late, like I said, they just lose because they just don't have a lot of counter. Like I said, they play 9. Sometimes they play the Khalifa, to start cycling their hand, which means they only have 8 left in the deck. And then if they mill a couple more, it's pretty easy to kind of math them out from that point on. Some of them play the 0 cost event, some of them don't. Too reliant on leader mills too to give you good targets for the trash. So like, you're milling 2 cards per turn essentially with your leader effect with Lucci, and you better hope that those cards are going to give you something that you need, specifically like a CP card for Kaku or a CP card for the, what is it called, Spandine. And if they don't, then you're kind of limiting how many plays you can actually have, unless you draw Spandam and you're able to play like Gecko and then play another Spandam from your trash. It's just it's not great at actually putting cards in the trash unless you're playing Finger Pistol, which is just another dead card, which is a problem. The deck just really struggles with milling stuff too early, because when you mill stuff too early, or I'm sorry, if you don't mill stuff enough, or if you have to use your pretty much every card you play to put cards back from your trash to the bottom of your deck, then you can't really use Tempest Kick as well, because Tempest Kick you have to have 10 cards in the trash for you to be able to obviously get the -3 off it. So I will say, let's put the notes aside. My final conclusion is, I think if you're playing in a 9 or 10 round tournament, I think Gecko Moria is actually the better deck than Lucci to play, because while Lucci has a higher ceiling than Gecko Moria is so much more consistent, and I think good players will value the consistency over the high end. And it's kind of like the whole debate about like Katakuri versus playing other decks, right? Like, oh, I could play Katakuri because it can high roll anyone out of the game, but it can also just completely take a dump on you, right? Whereas Sakazuki and decks like Gecko Moria in the previous set were so much more consistent at doing what they needed to do, and good players were able to just outskill their opponents because they were able to have less things go into variance, right? Because if a good player played Katakuri, they have to be reliant on a little bit on triggers, whereas if a good player played Sakazuki or Gecko, they had to be reliant on a little bit of draws, drawing well and hoping their searches don't whiff. But for the most part, the game is in their hands and it's their game to lose. And I think if I were to play any black deck in the future in set 7, it would be Gecko Moria, because one, I like the playstyle just more than I like Lucci, but two, I'm a little bit more of a defensive player, so I value having a little bit more options for defense. I also value having more counter. I've always been a person to play more 2Ks than most people, and then I value the searchability of Gecko Moria as well as the hand rip from Isho and Perona. Yeah, I definitely prefer Gecko Moria and think Gecko Moria is just slightly better in a big tournament. Now, if you are a good player, there's nothing wrong with you playing Lucci, but you might get a little bit unlucky for 1 or 2 rounds and just not draw cards when you need them because you milled them, and you might just lose because of it. I'm not saying that you're going to definitely lose, because Lucci obviously is a great deck, but I don't believe at this point in the game, in set 7, Rob Lucci has won any tournaments. I know it's gotten second like once or twice, but it hasn't won any tournaments, so I do think that is something to note. Let me know what you guys think, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.